Chapter 470. Do you really think that she is just a little second-grade concubine, Ru? Hong Fui looked at her funny. Didn't Mo Wushang tell you what she did in private? Hong Fui's words made her think of that night in the Imperial Garden, when Lu Qingru was molested by a man. She clenched her fists tightly. Her sharp nails dug deep into her flesh. But she didn't seem to feel the pain. At this moment, her mind was recalling the scene of Lu Qingru and that man. Even if she wanted to kill her, what could she do? Everything she did was for her. If she didn't see it with her own eyes that night, she wouldn't believe that Lu Qingru could do this for her. She didn't need anything in return and did it for her without any regrets. Bengong has no enmity with her. Why does she want to kill Bengong? Isn't it because she feels injustice for her dead friend? The regent, who was deeply in love with the late empress, unexpectedly changed his mind and fell in love with concubine Shen. Hong Fui smiled and walked in front of her, getting close to her earlobe. For the sake of Mo Wushang, concubine Shen's matter is my matter. I will be responsible for concubine Shen's safety. Before I leave, take it as my repayment to concubine Shen. Do you want me to help you kill her? No matter what, Lu Qingru is still the emperor's woman. Even if you have great abilities, it's still. She's just a mere second-grade concubine, Ru. Who has Feng Juqing truly cared about? You and I both know very well that even if Lu Qingru is dead, he would at most order someone to casually investigate. At that time, what he would find out would be the fact that Lu Qingru had an affair with many men of the Jianghu. How could a conceited man like Feng Juqing be willing to let his own woman wear such a hat on him? Shen Yueji slightly turned her face to avoid his approach and got up. You don't need to intervene in this matter. If you dare to hurt her, Bengong will definitely make you regret it. What a strange woman. This young master helped you out of kindness, but you don't appreciate it at all. Forget it, just take it as me being nosy. If you suffer in the hands of that woman in the future, don't run to Mo Wushang and complain that I didn't help you. Concubine Shen, let me kindly remind you that that woman is dangerous. Scram. Another teacup smashed towards him. This time, it was obviously more forceful. He didn't expect Shen Yueji to have such a big reaction when she mentioned that woman. A trace of surprise flashed across the man's pitch-black eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He once again reached out to catch the teacup, then placed it back in its original place. This young master has said everything that needs to be said. As for what to choose, it's all up to you, Imperial Consort. This one will take his leave. Shen Yueji did not stop him. She watched as the man's tall and handsome figure disappeared from her sight. The man's qinggong was top-notch. In just a blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace at a speed that was hard to be seen by the naked eye. Shen Yueji sat on the beauty chair, thinking about what the man had said before he left. Her emotions were in a mess, and not long after, she heavily overturned the teacup in front of her. The porcelain fell to the ground and made a loud noise. Double Happiness, who was waiting respectfully outside, heard it with his sharp ears. She quickly came in, and when she saw the broken tea set on the ground, she was stunned. She looked at Shen Yueji, who had an ugly expression on her face, and was puzzled. When she went out just now, her ladyship was still fine, but in such a short time, what happened to her? Chapter 471. She looked at Shen Yueji in surprise. Your Highness, what's wrong with you? Are you not feeling well? I'm fine. Shen Yueji rubbed her eyebrows. Shuangxi opened her mouth. Seeing that Shen Yueji didn't want to talk to her, she didn't ask more. Instead, she took out a small folded piece of paper from her sleeve. Your Highness, when I was guarding outside just now, a pigeon suddenly flew towards me. Look. Shen Yueji looked at the paper she respectfully presented with both hands. She narrowed her eyes. Letter. Yes. She took the paper and opened it. It was a short line of words, clear and concise. The strokes were plain and didn't use much ink. His handwriting was like him, silent and cold. At a glance, Shen Yueji recognized who the owner of this handwriting was. Jiyu Mujue. She had seen him write when she was young. His writing style and the strength of his strokes were incomparable to ordinary people. Everyone had their own style of writing, But Jiyu Mujue's uniqueness lay in the fact that his handwriting was very difficult to imitate. It wasn't that his handwriting wasn't good, but it was too outstanding and had its own characteristics. That was why it was difficult to imitate. Your Highness, who gave you the letter? This servant saw that the messenger pigeon seemed to be very intelligent and knew to fly towards us. After delivering the letter, it flew away. Shin Yueji didn't tell her about Jiyu Mujue. After reading the contents of the letter, she casually rolled the paper in her hand into a small ball and threw it into the incense burner. She looked at the lingering cigarette in the incense burner and the smell of burnt paper at that moment. A man entered the Phoenix Palace just now. Shuangshi was speechless. Your Highness, are you talking about the Emperor? Shin Yueji glanced at her sideways. No. Shuangshi was speechless. The Regent? Shin Yueji shook her head. No. Feeling the strange expression on Shuangshi's face, she said, Your Highness, did you find another man? Shin Yueji was speechless. Shin Yueji couldn't help laughing. She took a sip of tea and said, Do you think I can't live without a man? Then what kind of man can enter our Phoenix Perch Palace? This is the Imperial Palace, and it's heavily guarded. This servant's martial arts aren't low, but I don't know how he got in. This man must want to leave, or else your Imperial Highness wouldn't like him. He's one of Mo Wushang's men. I've seen him once in the Regent's residence. Someone close to the son-in-law? Was he sent by the son-in-law to pass a message to you? It doesn't count. Mo Wushang didn't know that he was coming. He snuck into the palace. That man didn't bully you, did he? He didn't bully me, but he said something to make me leave your son-in-law. Ah! Shuangshi's face turned bitter. Niang Niang, you must not agree to him. You must know that in this world, only you and the son-in-law are the most compatible. Does the son-in-law know about this? If the son-in-law knew that this dog of a man had such thoughts, the son-in-law would definitely cripple him. Double happiness. Ah, Your Highness. How much do you know about Mo Wushang? Shin Yueji's question stumped Shuangshi. In the past, Shuangshi would never have thought about this question seriously. She only knew that Mo Wushang was the regent of the Feng nation who was on equal footing with the emperor. It was known how much military power and connections the emperor had. However, it was unknown how much military power the regent had behind him. It was so mysterious that people didn't dare to invade it. Chapter 472. Before this servant entered the palace, I vaguely heard Bai Shin talking about the regent. They said that the regent's identity was strange. When they didn't know what happened, he had already secured the position of the regent of Feng country and was on equal footing with the emperor. Even the emperor, including the former emperor, had tacitly agreed to this. And it was said that the former emperor seemed to be very afraid of the regent. No matter how much the regent disobeyed the former emperor didn't dare to say a word. The former emperor was the emperor, but when facing the regent, he was like a subject. Oh, is that so? Your Highness, why are you suddenly asking about this? Speaking of this, Double Happiness suddenly smiled strangely and bumped her elbow. Your Highness, are you worried about the regent? You're afraid that one day, the emperor will find out about your relationship with the regent. Will the regent be able to protect himself then? Shin Yueji, Your Highness's worries are completely unnecessary. Have you forgotten the former empress? Back then, the former empress had an affair with the regent and was found out by the emperor when they slept on the same bed. In the end, the emperor only punished the former empress, but did not touch the regent at all. This is enough to show that the regent's background and backing make the emperor unable to do anything to him. You know so much. Of course. When Your Highness liked the regent, this servant often helped to investigate the regent's identity. He is someone that even the emperor can't do anything about, let alone this servant. This servant only knows this much. Your Highness, tell me, what is the regent's identity? Have you asked him about it? The regent likes you so much. As long as you ask, this servant believes that the regent will definitely tell you everything without hiding anything. Shin Yueji snorted coldly. If he wanted to tell me, he would have told me long ago. Why do I need to ask him personally? Moreover, She already had a 90% understanding of his identity. She was the one who guessed it, so what did it have to do with him telling her personally? The Emperor of the Dark North Kingdom? Who would have thought that Mo Wushang was the Emperor of the Dark North? Suddenly, an idea flashed in her mind, as if she recalled something. It seemed that when she was still Jiu Yuqin, her private affair with Mo Wushang was discovered. During the period when Mo Wushang left the Feng Nation, there was a commotion in the northern underworld. Back then, the incident in the North Sea had spread far and wide. She had forgotten the exact reason. She only remembered that the incident had spread from the North Sea to the Feng Kingdom, and then to the Feng Kingdom's imperial palace. Even she, who was in the imperial palace, had heard about it. That she thought of a not-so-good guess. Actually, when Mo Wushang left in a fit of pique, it wasn't because he didn't care about her life or death. Was it because Dark North needed him to take care of something? In addition, she had said a lot of insults to him in bed that day. Every word stabbed at his heart. No man would be able to take it, but he had endured it all and only chose to leave in the end. She was thinking, if Mo Wushang was still in the Feng Nation, if he was still there, how could he be so indifferent after knowing that she was drowned in the lake? She heard from Ji Chu that after she died, he drank every day and looked in the direction of Jiaoyang Palace. He stayed there every night, guarding her past. Your Highness, what's wrong? Seeing that her expression wasn't right, Shuangxi called out to her worriedly. Chapter 473. Shun Yueji snapped out of her trance and looked at her. I'm fine. Let me in. Let me in. I want to see Imperial Consort Nyang Nyang. Please let me in. I'm kneeling for you. Sob sob sob. I'm begging you. Outside the hall, there was a sudden burst of hoarse cries. Shuangxi walked out first. Nyang Nyang, this servant will go see. Jiaoi Nyang Nyang, it's not that this servant doesn't want to let you in, but Imperial Consort Nyang Nyang is unwell. Even the Emperor himself ordered that no one is allowed to visit and let Imperial Consort Nyang Nyang focus on recovering. Hearing the argument outside, Shun Yueji frowned. Soon, Shuangxi's loud rebuke came from outside the hall. The servant girl from before was so frightened that she immediately knelt on the ground. Sister Shuangxi, it's not that this servant doesn't know the difference between seniors and juniors, but Jiaoi Nyang Nyang knelt to this servant the moment she came. This servant doesn't know what to do. A third-rank Jiaoi Nyang Nyang knelt to a lowly palace maid. If this got out, it would be a slap to Feng Qi Palace's face. At that time, there would be more discussions in the harem. People would say that Shun Yueji was favored and even the servants of Feng Qi Palace benefited from it. A lowly servant girl didn't even care about a third-rank Jiaoi Nyang Nyang. Shuangxi looked at Jiaoi Nyang Nyang who was kneeling on the ground and crying. She knew this woman in front of her. She had been sent to the palace by her father. Because her father had made a lot of contributions in the court, she was given the title of third-rank Jiaoi. Jiaoi Nyang Nyang was gentle and virtuous at home. After entering the palace, she had always been obedient and never used her position to oppress others. Therefore, during the days she had been in the palace, she was quite popular in the palace. Moreover, Shuangxi had met her a few times in the imperial garden. She always smiled and greeted her. Did something happen to Jiaoi Nyang Nyang? Why are you crying like this? Are you asking to see Imperial Consort Nyang Nyang? Shuangxi knew Jiaoi Nyang Nyang, but it didn't mean that her miss knew. Her miss didn't even know this person existed. Thinking of her previous friendly attitude, Shuangxi's tone wasn't as aggressive as before. He spoke to her patiently. If it is about matters of the Hugong, the Empress is the master of the Hugong. Jiao Nyang Nyang should ask to see the Empress. I believe that the Empress would be very happy to see you. All the concubines in the harem know that my consort was severely injured in order to save His Majesty. Now that she has managed to survive, His Majesty has specially ordered that Imperial Consort should stay in Phoenix Palace to recuperate and not allow anyone to visit her. I'm afraid Wu Jiaoi's matter. No, I can only come to see Imperial Consort. If I tell Her Majesty about this, Her Majesty will definitely kill me. Hearing her anxious and trembling voice, Shuangxi frowned. What can't you tell the Empress? If it's really something important that can't be told to the Empress, then tell His Majesty. His Majesty is kind and No. Wu Jiaoi's tears fell like rain. No, I can't tell Her Majesty. I can't tell His Majesty either. If they know, they will think that I'm spreading rumors in the harem to confuse people. His Majesty and Empress won't let me go. Then what is it? Why must you tell my consort? Is Wu Jiaoi not afraid of my consort? No, I can only tell Imperial Consort Niang about this matter. Please help me, Imperial Consort Niang. Wu Jiaoi knelt on the ground and kowtowed heavily. Chapter 474. It made Shuangxi feel that if she did not let her in to see her consort, she would kneel here and never leave. The little bit of friendliness he had towards her previously had completely disappeared with her current lack of propriety. He looked at her coldly. You clearly know that my lady consort is seriously injured, yet you still let her care about your trivial matters. Since Wu Jiaoi wants to kneel, then continue to kneel. You stay here and take a good look. If she barges in, I will hold you responsible. She glared at the palace maid beside her, only to see the palace maid nodding in fright. Sister Shuangxi, don't worry, this servant will definitely watch over Wu Jiaoi. With her guarantee, Shuangxi entered the hall without looking back. He told Shen Yueji everything that had happened outside. Actually, she was sitting in the main hall and was not far from it. Shen Yueji could roughly hear the arguments outside. What is this Wu Jiaoi's background? She is the daughter of a third-ranked official in the imperial court. Her family is in the capital and is loved by the common people. After entering the palace, this Wu Jiaoi did not spoil and did not take the initiative to curry favor with any of the consorts. After being in the palace for so many days, this servant has not seen her getting close to any of the consorts in the inner palace. I just don't understand why she suddenly came to see you today. Moreover, this servant saw that her words were flustered and her expression revealed fear, as if something had happened. Your Highness, do you want to see her? If your Highness does not intend to see her, this servant will find an excuse to reject her. She was just a third-ranked Jiaoi. With her consort status, it would not be difficult to chase her away. Shen Yueji hesitated for a moment. The crying outside was still going on. It did not seem to be an act, but the crying of a person who had really reached that point of despair. The voice was hoarse and the crying was sorrowful, like a person who had nowhere to go. She pondered for a moment. Let her in first. Yes, Your Highness. With Shen Yueji's permission, Shuangxi went outside to let her in. Wu Jiaoi's face lit up when she heard that Shuangxi was willing to let her in. She quickly got up from the ground and followed Shuangxi carefully into the main hall. After taking off her graceful and gorgeous attire, Shen Yueji was only wearing a thin coat at this moment. Her beautiful face didn't have any makeup on, but it was still elegant, refined, and beautiful. Wu Jiaoi didn't dare to look at it for too long. She only took one look before she lowered her head and bowed respectfully. Your servant greets the imperial consort. Wu Jiaoi. Shen Yueji looked at her indifferently. The woman in front of him couldn't be said to be extremely alluring, but she was still a pretty girl from a humble family. She was dressed in plain clothes, and her face didn't have the domineering aura of a superior. I'm here. Wu Jiaoi lowered her head humbly. Her pretty face still had traces of tears that had yet to dry, and she looked pitiful. This consort has never had any dealings with you before. You took advantage of this consort's severe injuries to run over to this consort's Phoenix Perch Palace and throw a tantrum. Those who don't know would think that this consort has bullied you. What? What happened that made you give up what is near at hand and seek for what is far away? You didn't go to see the Emperor and the Empress, but ran over to see this consort? Do you have to tell this to this consort? Wu Jiaoi trembled and knelt on the ground. Without Shen Yueji's permission, she didn't dare to get up. She just lowered her head. Before this consort entered the palace, I had heard some rumors about the harem. Chapter 475. After I entered the palace, I asked around to see if there were any taboos in the harem. I'm a coward and have nightmares since I was young. Every time I had a nightmare, it seemed real and fake at the same time. Her fingers were trembling. Even her teeth were chattering. She didn't dare to raise her head and stared at the ground. She knew that Shen Yueji's gaze was on top of her head, so she didn't dare to raise her head. This concubine. This concubine knows that something strange happened in Jiaoyang Palace some time ago. His Majesty executed those people who were gossiping and the rest kept their mouths shut. However, this concubine still found out. At the mention of this, her frail body began to tremble again. The way the late Empress looked when she died, her face was covered with nails. Imperial concubine, you must save me. Wu Jiaoyi raised her head with tears streaming down her face. She looked at Shen Yueji pleadingly with her teary eyes. I. Last night, Xiao Yu went out to make tea for this servant, but after he went out, he never came back. I had a nightmare and tossed and turned in bed. I couldn't fall asleep because of fear. I thought that Xiao Yu had gone out for so long, so I went to look for her. In the end. Recalling the scene of Xiao Yu's tragic death, her voice was filled with endless despair and fear. She buried her face in her hands and said, Xiao Yu died outside the hall. Her face was full of nails. Her limbs were dismembered. Her skin and flesh were peeled off, hanging loosely on her bones. There was a pool of blood. Her eyeballs were half hanging on the ground. Wu Jiaoyi covered her face. After Wu Jiaoyi entered the palace, did she offend any concubines in the harem? Someone deliberately plotted to murder her maidservant and purposely made her look like this to scare her. It was not strange at all. No, Wu Jiaoyi shook her head. Imperial concubine, ever since I entered the palace, I've always abided by my duties and never dared to cross the line. I've never been in contact with any concubines in the harem. I've always been alone. I've never offended anyone. This servant didn't dare to tell His Majesty about this. Ever since the death of the late Empress, His Majesty had suppressed all the rumors about the late Empress. No one was allowed to mention it again. Moreover, the late Empress was the Empress' elder sister, so this servant didn't dare to tell her anything. This servant was afraid that the Empress would say that this servant was talking nonsense and kill this servant. This servant had no choice but to look for Imperial Consort Niang and beg Imperial Consort Niang to save this servant. Xiao Yu. After Xiao Yu died, she crawled up from the ground with her broken limbs. The eyeball that had fallen to the ground glared at me, she said. Wu Jiaoyi's body trembled violently. She said, Imperial concubine, her corpse climbed up from the ground and could still talk to me. She said she's back for revenge. She's going to kill all the women in the harem. The moment she said those words, she felt as if she had lost all strength in her body because of her fear. It was as if her soul had been sucked dry. She was afraid that Shen Yueji wouldn't believe her words and would think that she was talking nonsense. After calming down for a long time, she slowly found her voice. She stretched out her arm and rolled up her long sleeves. It could be seen that there were countless scratches on the back of her smooth hand. It was as if those sharp nails had scratched her flesh, and those wounds had already turned purple. They were green and long. Some places were swollen. Chapter 476. Your Highness, look, these were all scratched by Xiao Yu. When her corpse crawled up from the ground, she grabbed this concubine's arm. Her fingernails were very long, like knives. This concubine couldn't move, much less dare to touch her. This concubine wanted to push her away, but her body was covered in minced flesh. As soon as this concubine touched her, her flesh began to fall from her body. Her fingernails scratched my flesh. She said she wanted to kill me. She said. She wanted to dissect my body while I was still alive. Wu Jiaoyi's voice was hoarse from crying. Your Highness, I swear, I really didn't do anything bad. I beg you, please save me. I beg you to chase me out of the palace. I want to go home, sob. Was there really such a strange thing in this world? Shuang Shiguang was listening at the side, imagining the scene she was talking about. Her hair stood on end. She subconsciously looked at Shen Yueji beside her, only to find that her face was calm. There was nothing strange at all. Your Highness. Where is Xiao Yu's body now? It's, Wu Jiaoyi's frail body trembled again. I deserve to die. At that time, Xiao Yu's corpse wanted to kill me. I was scared, so I rushed into the palace and used fire to burn her to death. Imperial concubine, the imperial harem is really haunted. It must be the ghost of the late empress who died unjustly. She didn't want to stay here anymore. She really didn't want to stay here anymore. She wanted to go home. She wanted to go home. Wu Jiaoyi, calm down. No. No. There must be a ghost in this harem. There must be. No wonder I've been dreaming about some strange things ever since I entered the palace. I can always dream of a ghost face with nails sticking to my face, and every time I sleep, we'll stick to each other. The late empress is dead. That is a fact. How can a dead person become a malicious ghost? If anyone who died a wrongful death would become a vengeful ghost after death, then the world would have long been in chaos. The late empress had no enmity with Wu Jiaoyi, so why did she bother you after she became a malicious spirit? Facing Shen Yueji's words, Wu Jiaoyi fiercely shook her head. I don't know. I don't know anything. I really don't know anything. I don't know why she's pestering me. I want to go home, Imperial concubine Shen. I want to leave the palace. Anyway, I'm not favored. My father's official position is dispensable in the court. I beg you, let me out of the palace. I don't want to stay in the palace anymore. I will die, sob sob. I will definitely die. It's easier said than done for an imperial concubine to leave the palace. Shen Yueji glanced at her. Wu Jiaoyi, even I don't have the ability to let you leave the palace safely. If you want to leave the palace, you can only go out lying down. Seeing the tears on Wu Jiaoyi's face, Shen Yueji sighed. After what happened last night, it seemed that the harem was destined to not be peaceful. She believed what Wu Jiaoyi said. In the harem, she didn't offend any imperial concubine. However, the other party targeted her first, and she was just a victim. Maybe she resisted too much last night, otherwise, the one who died would not only be Xiaoyu, but also herself. It was also possible that the other party deliberately let her go. The purpose was to make her afraid that the empress would be flustered and spread this matter in the harem. The more the better. Wu Jiaoyi's experience reminded Shen Yueji of the two-headed monster she met in Jiayang Palace. Chapter 477. Was this related to Lu Qingru? Shen Yueji glanced at Wu Jiaoyi, who was kneeling on the ground, and said, "You can go back first. I will investigate this matter." Wu Jiaoyi cried even harder when she heard Shen Yueji asking her to go back. "No. I won't go back. Imperial concubine, please don't chase me back. If I go back, I will definitely die." Imperial concubine, according to Lu Qingru's character. Shen Yueji was a little hesitant. Wu Jiaoyi's actions were out of her expectations. If her guess was correct, then she was the one behind all of this. Her goal was to make Wu Jiaoyi spread the news. However, she didn't. Instead, she suppressed the matter and came to find her, asking for her help. It was hard to guarantee that Lu Qingru wouldn't kill her in the end. If a third-rank Jiaoyi died in her own palace, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. At that time, there would be a lot of waves in the imperial harem. Imperial concubine, maybe it was because she saw Wu Jiaoyi crying so much. Double happiness felt bad. Look at how scared she is. Why don't we leave her here first? She felt that it was inappropriate to say this. There might be a few concubines who knew that her imperial concubine was favored. If they followed her, they would be able to meet the emperor. But looking at Wu Jiaoyi crying like a bear, she didn't look like a scheming person. Moreover, she had fought with her a few times in the palace. She felt that she was different from the other women. Shen Yueji saw her dilemma. She said indifferently, "If you don't want to go back, then stay. I have a side hall here. You can stay there for now." Wu Jiaoyi was happy when she heard this. She quickly kowtowed. "Thank you, Imperial concubine. Thank you, Imperial concubine. I will remember your kindness forever." Double happiness. "Yes, Imperial concubine. Arrange a place for Wu Jiaoyi to stay." "Yes, Imperial concubine." Ji Chu. As double happiness led Wu Jiaoyi away, Shen Yueji took a sip of tea and called out softly. The man's strong figure appeared in front of her. He said respectfully, "Miss Shen, help me investigate something." The strange things that happened in Wu Jiaoi's chamber last night were indeed caused by concubine Ru. Ji Chu looked at her and said. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. You found out so quickly? When master left this subordinate by young lady Shen's side, he told this subordinate to pay more attention to the movements at Huayang Palace. Last night, this subordinate saw someone sneaking into Huayang Palace. This subordinate followed the black-clothed man all the way and saw Xiao Yu's death with my own eyes. Was it done by those two-headed monsters? No, it should be someone else. It's just that this person's identity is strange, and his speed is astonishing. It's as if he knew that this subordinate was tailing him, so he shook me off very quickly. What about Xiao Yu's resurrection? It was no different from the two-headed monster from before, but according to Wu Jiaoi's description, her body was decomposed after death and then resurrected. Her face was full of nails, her limbs were strange, and her appearance was terrifying. Shen Yueji sat up a little straighter. So, there are other mutants in the palace? Did the two-headed monster cause any trouble in the palace recently? Ji Chu shook his head. Since the last incident, this subordinate has not seen their existence in the palace for a long time. As for Xiao Yu, Ji Chu hesitated for a moment. Xiao Yu should have been manipulated after his death. As for how he was manipulated, this subordinate still needs time to investigate. Chapter 478. Did you hear Wu Jiaoi's description of me just now? I did hear some of it. When Xiao Yu was dismembered, I was there. After the man in black dismembered Xiao Yu, he didn't do anything else. He just threw Xiao Yu's body outside Wu Jiaoi's palace and left. Ji Chu recalled seriously. About an hour later, Wu Jiaoi came out to look for someone and saw Xiao Yu lying on the ground. Then, Xiao Yu came back to life and attacked Wu Jiaoi with his limp limbs. It seems that Wu Jiaoi didn't lie. Shen Yueji squinted her eyes. You said that the man in black's martial arts is very high. Yes. His Qinggong is far above me. As for his martial arts, I haven't felt how strong his inner force is. He should be deliberately suppressing it. Are you sure that this man in black is also a man in Lu Qingrou's palace? Yes. Shen Yueji's heart turned cold. Every time she heard that there was a man with high martial arts in Lu Qingrou's Huayang Palace, her heart would turn cold. No one knew better than her what this meant. The reason why these extraordinary people in the Jianghu were willing to risk their lives for her, wasn't it because, she clenched her fists a little and had an answer in her heart. Imperial concubine Ru is too mysterious and ruthless. Master has entrusted a task. As long as her hands don't stretch too far and reach Phoenix Palace, then this subordinate, Master, will not allow this subordinate to intervene in this matter. I've taken Wu Jiaoi in. To her, it's the same as going against her. Do you think she won't reach out to me? Before Hong Fui left, she had already reminded her that compared to any other woman in this palace, the one Lu Qingru wanted to get rid of more was undoubtedly not her. Because it was because of her appearance that Mo Wushang's heart had a change of heart towards Jiyu Yuqin. She couldn't touch Mo Wushang, so she could only transfer this hatred to her. Seeing how Lu Qingru had sacrificed herself to avenge her, she couldn't help but recall that when she was still alive, the two of them had supported each other in the palace. Other women fawned on her because they wanted to borrow her position as the empress to look at the emperor. But Lu Qingru had sincerely wanted to be with her. Whether it was before or after entering the palace, even if the emperor had arrived, Lu Qingrou's wholehearted gaze would only fall on her, shouldering all the dangers and punishments for her. This consort understands. No matter what concubine Ru does, this consort won't allow you to harm her. This, Ji Chu looked up at her in surprise. Seeing his apprehension, Shen Yueji nodded. Don't worry, she won't hurt me. Ji Chu did not believe these words. In fact, before this, Lu Qingru had wanted to hurt Shen Yueji countless times. Shen Yueji did not explain much to him. Not only will I not let you touch her, but I will also need you to stop all the outsiders who enter the palace in the future. I will not let them get close to Ru Fei. Can you do it? This, Ji Chu thought that his martial arts were excellent, but he was not the best in the world. This subordinate can stop most of the people in the pugilistic world. But some people in the pugilistic world are not as good as this subordinate, but they are good at using poison. I'm afraid it will be difficult for this subordinate. If I can stop them, then I will. If I can't, then forget it. Shin Yueji closed her eyes. Her heart was throbbing with pain. Once such a pure and kind person, but now for her, he had become so cheap. Chapter 479. She believed that she had never wronged anyone in her life, but Lu Qingru was the only one who made her feel indebted and sorry. Obviously, she was already dead. She could rely on her father to make a name for herself in this harem. Why did she have to sacrifice everything for a dead person, planning and scheming, using all kinds of methods and thoughts? What did she get in return? The dead Jiu Yuqin would not come back to life, and the friendship between them had already ended with her death. Hua Yang Palace Niang Niang. As far as this servant knows, Wu Jiaoyi did not publicize the incident last night, but ran to the imperial concubine's palace and has not returned until now. At this moment, in Hua Yang Palace, Lu Hui looked at the young girl in the bath. Her skin was whiter than snow, but there was no color of blood, and her skin was as white as paper. The pale and cold face did not have the sweet smile of the previous empress, and even the aura around her was cold and lifeless. This kind of cold aura was like a dead person. Every time she saw Niang Niang like this, she could not help but want to cry. She had been by Niang Niang's side for so many years, and since she could remember, Niang Niang was such a cheerful person, as if she did not know the feeling of loneliness. But now, she was like an empty shell without a soul, and no matter what she did, she was like a puppet, tortured by others. Looking at her white body, there were densely packed marks everywhere. Every time after they finished, she would soak here for a day and a night. The water in the bath had become cold, but she did not allow her to change the hot water. She kept soaking like this, until her body was swollen, until she cruelly wiped away those ambiguous and disgusting marks, causing them to bleed. She knelt in front of her, and finally could not help but burst into tears. Niang Niang, this servant begs you, don't torment me like this anymore. The previous empress is already dead. If the previous empress spirit in heaven sees you like this, she will definitely not die in peace. Niang Niang. Niang Niang, why are you doing this? There were so many people, all strange shapes and ugly faces, no matter what kind of men, as long as they could bring her benefits, she would accept them all. Lu Hui shed tears, wanting to put a piece of clothing on her body. However, the woman in the bath did not seem to notice. Her entire body was immersed in the water, and her eyes were gazing into the distance. No one knew what she was thinking. Hui, are you tired? This servant isn't tired. This servant just feels tired seeing your highness like this. If you're tired, you can leave the palace. I'll let them bring you out of the palace and give you a sum of money. From now on, don't ever come back, okay? Her highness, Qiao Hui looked at her in disbelief. Niang Niang, are you going to kick me out of the palace? Lu Qingru finally looked at her and smiled weakly. I have my own plans, you are innocent. Hui, you have suffered so much with me, you should go. After you leave the palace, find a man who will treat you well. From now on, you can live your own life, you don't need to accompany me anymore. No. Your Highness, don't chase this servant away, don't chase this servant away, this servant won't go, sob, Your Highness, this servant won't go, even if this servant dies, this servant will stay with Your Highness forever. This servant doesn't want to leave Your Highness. This servant doesn't want to marry. 2 lines of clear tears slid down Lu Qingru's pale face. Compared to Qin this little grievance of mine is nothing. Chapter 480. Lu Hui, do you know? Yesterday, I dreamt of Qin again. In the dream, she was perfectly fine. Holding her hand, playing with her in the capital, she looked so beautiful when she smiled. Her eyes were still so bright. Even if she was covered in wounds, even if she had a mother who only knew how to abuse her, even if she didn't have a good life, she still smiled so happily. Every time she sneaked out, she would be beaten by them when she returned, but she said that she liked to play with her, liked to be with her. She was very happy. She didn't protect her well, the past was like a knife. Every time, It would stab her and make her feel pain. Blood dripped from her heart, full of holes. Lu Qingru clutched her heart. I can't accept that such a kind and beautiful person should rest in the earth. I can't accept that she was harmed by evil people. Evil people could still live so happily, but she could never open her mouth, could not open her eyes, could not open her eyes, could not open her eyes. She said that there are many beautiful things in this world, don't just look at the bad things in front of you. But now, she doesn't even have the chance to open her eyes and look at the beautiful things in this world. Veins popped on the back of her hand. The bone-chilling water was not as cold as her body. Lu Qingru closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Father, mother, they died for me. Everything I did was for Qin. I have already done this. I will not stop. It is impossible for me to stop. If I can do it again, I will still make the same choice. Everyone can betray my Qin, only I won't. Feng Jiuqing, Jiu Yuyin, is cruel and unscrupulous, like a beast. How can I let them sleep peacefully? Jiu Yuyin, if she doesn't die, I will truly let my Qin down. Her palms slapped the water, as if she was talking to Lu Hui, but also muttering to herself, if Wu Jiaoyi can't do it, there will be a second Jiaoyi, Beauty, Jiu, they will all end up like Qin. I want Jiu Yuyin to be unable to eat and sleep. I want her to know that Qin can't just die like this. I want her to feel fear. She is an evil woman. I want her to repent. I want her to go down and be buried with my Qin. Your Highness, please don't go on like this. If the late Empress was still alive, she would be very sad. She didn't want to see you living in hatred every day. She wanted you to live well. She didn't want you to. Hui, ever since she died, I don't know what it means to live well. Without her, how am I different from the walking dead? We can't go back, Hui. We can't go back to anything. This kind of life wasn't what she wanted. Every day, she had to receive different men. She hated this kind of life. But every time she thought of Qin's tragic death, as long as it was the only way to avenge her, she could endure all the humiliation. So what if she was raped by a man? As long as it's for Qin, as long as it's for Qin, is concubine Ru not in her chambers? At this moment, a voice came from outside the hall. An indifferent voice, a familiar voice. This caused Lu Qingrou's deathly pale face to immediately gain a few more colors. A fierce look flashed across his pitch-black eyes. Even Lu Hui's face darkened when she heard this voice. What is she doing here? Doesn't she know that the person Her Highness hates the most is her? Chapter 481. Lady Murong, her ladyship is bathing. It's not that she's not in the palace. Lu Hui walked out of the side hall and saw the lady sitting alone. She didn't know if it was her own misconception, but she felt that the Murong Yun she saw today was a little strange compared to her usual self. As for what was strange, she couldn't tell. Murong Yun saw her come out and retracted her gaze. Her tone was indifferent as she said, "Since that's the case, I'll wait here for concubine Ru to finish bathing. Lady Murong, if there's anything you need, you can tell me directly. Her ladyship has already said that she won't see any guests, no matter who it is, even His Majesty is no exception." In the past, Murong Yun would have turned hostile because of a servant girl's rudeness. But now, not only was her expression calm, even the wet nurse behind her stood there quietly without interrupting. "I know, that's why I came uninvited. Her ladyship won't see anyone. Lady Murong, please leave." Lu Hui impolitely gave the order to leave, but she found that her order to leave fell into Murong Yun's ears, as if she didn't take it seriously. Her expression changed in anger. "Lady Murong, do you think that your Jiu family's influence in Foam Country can cover the sky with one hand? My ladyship has never had any dealings with you, so why did you come to cause trouble for her? It's not enough that you've forced your own daughter to death, now you want to force my ladyship to death as well?" When she mentioned Jiu Yuqin, Lu Hui didn't know if it was an illusion, but she could accurately capture the flash of pain on Murong Yun's face. It flashed past so quickly that Lu Hui thought she was seeing things. When she realized this, she almost laughed out loud. Pain? How could Murong Yun be in pain? She was a heartless woman who had personally killed her own daughter. If she had any remorse, she would have done so long ago and not waited until now. What was her motive for entering the palace to look for her ladyship? Wasn't it because she saw her ladyship living well in the inner palace? As Jiyu Yuachin's best friend, as long as it was someone by her side, no matter if it was a friend or a beast, she would not let a single one of them live. Lu Hui was now disheartened. She was no longer afraid of Murongyun. His tone was overbearing and his gaze was filled with hatred. Lady Murong, please return. My Niang will not see you. I have something to ask her. If she doesn't want to see me, I won't leave. Not leaving? Lu Hui sneered. Lady Murong, surely you know how much my young miss hates you. She wants nothing more than to eat your flesh and drink your blood. Today, you dare to enter the main hall of Huiyang Palace with only a maidservant. Are you not afraid that when my empress sees you, she will pounce on you and take your life? Murongyun wasn't afraid at all. Instead, she laughed out loud. I know, she wants my life. Ever since China died, she... Shut up. What qualifications do you have to call China's name? Lu Qingru came out wearing only a coat. Following Jiyu Yuachin's death, her frail body became thinner and thinner every day. She hadn't seen her for a month. At this moment, she seemed to have become a different person. She was only skin and bones. Only that delicate and beautiful face let Murongyun know that she was still her. Her gaze towards her was filled with strangeness and hatred. It was the same as before. If one were to say how cold and disgusted she was towards Jiyu Yuchin, then how much she hated and loathed herself. Chapter 482. Your ladyship, why did you come out? It's cold outside, this servant will bring you some clothes. No need, Hui-er, chase the irrelevant people out, I have something to say to Madame Murong. Your ladyship. Lu Hui looked at her worriedly. Your ladyship, please go in first, this servant will chase the people you hate out. No need. Lu Qingru smiled. Madame Murong has something to say to me. Coincidentally, I also have a lot to say to Madame Murong. Lu Hui was a little embarrassed, but when she saw Lu Qingru's indifferent expression, she could only leave unwillingly. When she passed by Murongyun, she glared at her fiercely. I don't care how powerful Madame Murong's Jiyu family is, this is the imperial palace, my ladyship is a second-rank concubine Ru personally appointed by His Majesty. If anything happens to her in Huiyang Palace, I will definitely not forgive you. Murongyun did not care about her threat at all. If I really wanted to do something to your ladyship, I would not just sit here quietly now. Lu Hui felt that what she said was reasonable, so she stomped her feet and left unwillingly. After Lu Hui left, Lu Qingru also found a place to sit, far away from Murongyun. She calmly took a sip of tea, her expression was cold and arrogant, even her gaze towards Ji Yunshu was filled with mockery. Speaking of which, Bengong has recently investigated an old matter from many years ago and felt that this matter would make Bengong happy. Originally, I had planned to wait for a few days, and when the time was right, I would inform this matter to Lady Murong. However, I didn't expect that Lady Murong would arrive faster than I had expected. The matter you investigated, is it related to me? The answer was non-committal. Lu Qingru smiled and did not say anything. Murongyun raised her eyebrows. What matter? First come, first served. Since Madame Murong came first, I believe Madame Murong also has something to ask me. I will give you this opportunity. I will allow you to speak first. Murongyun was not angry. Today I came to Concubine Ru's place. I do have something to ask. She pondered for a moment, then said, I know that when Qin was alive, she had the best relationship with you. Seeing that her hand holding the teacup suddenly tightened, Murongyun stopped talking and looked at her. Lady Murong, this consort hopes that you will remember this consort's words. You are not fit to call Qin by her name. Qin is my daughter, the child I gave birth to after 10 months of pregnancy. How can I not have the right to call her by her name? Murongyun was infuriated by her cold tone. You are just a friend of hers, and I am her biological mother. What right do you have to interfere in the matter between us? Instead, Lu Qingru was tickled by her words. What qualifications do you have to say that you are her mother? My biological father and mother even risked their lives to save me when I was in trouble. What about you? Apart from abusing and hurting Qin every day, what other responsibilities did you fulfill as a mother? Madam Murong, are you speechless now? Don't tell this consort that Qin's death had nothing to do with the two of you. She used to like Feng Zhoqing so much that she wanted nothing more than to die for him, so how could she possibly commit adultery with another man? Because of the woman's emphasis on the latter part, her tone became much sharper. Lu Qingrou's eyes turned red. The only thing your Jiyu family has ever done to her is harm. Chapter 483. Why are you here to look for me now? Are you here to repent? Is it because Qin has been dead for so long that you've finally realized that she's actually your biological daughter? Do you feel sorry for her? Your Highness Concubine Ru, I know that you have a lot of opinions about me in your heart. But what I want to say is that I'm not here to quarrel with you. Since you're safe and sound in the palace, I can guarantee that you'll live a luxurious life in the palace for Qin's sake. No one will be able to shake your position as a second-grade concubine Ru. Do you think I care? Lu Qingru roared at her rudely. Murongyun, the position of a second-grade concubine Ru, other women might care about it, but I don't. The reason why I came to the palace was because of Qin. I didn't want her to be alone in the palace without a friend to talk to. So I begged my father to send me to the palace. Not to mention that Feng Zhoqing gave me the title of second-grade concubine Ru for my father's sake. Even if he gave me the title of empress, I wouldn't care. I'd rather stay by Qin's side and be her maidservant. I'd watch over her every day and share her joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. Why must all of you be so cruel? Qin is such a kind and beautiful person. Why must all of you treat her this way? What did she do wrong? Murongyun, is it just because she's the daughter born from you and Jiyu Xian? It's just because of her birth that you can't be with that man, right? If the first part of Lu Qingrou's words had moved Murongyun, then the latter part of Lu Qingrou's words were undoubtedly not as sharp as a knife, causing Murongyun's expression to change in an instant. How do you know all this? Guess how I know? Lu Qingru smiled gently. I receive so many men every day. Which one of them isn't a famous figure in the pugilistic world? As long as I want to ask or investigate, they'll do their best to investigate for me. I know everything about you, Murongyun, and that man's past. Not only that, I know everything that you know and I know everything that you don't. You. What did you say? I'll talk. Lu Qingru laughed coldly and moved closer to her. I receive men every day and enjoy the pleasure that those men give me every day. So what if I don't have an emperor? I'm still carefree and happy in this harem. Do you know how many men I've accepted after Qin died? The most I've ever done was 6 in one day. Lu Qingru was a proud and aloof person. When Jiyu Yuqin was still alive, all her smiles were only for Jiyu Yuqin alone. To outsiders, she would always give them a cold and beautiful face. After Jiyu Yuqin's death, she was even worse than before. She was like an otherworldly fairy who did not know how to laugh or cry. There was no expression on her face. Wherever she went, people would look on coldly. Murongyun stumbled backwards, as if she couldn't believe what Lu Qingru had just said. How did she become like this? She had always been dismissive of men, but she did not doubt the truth of her words. Because when she said this, she had already pulled down the front of her collar. There were densely packed marks on it. How could she, who had already experienced it, not know what it was? She didn't know why. In the past, she might have directly reported this matter to the emperor and let him use the name of a promiscuous harem to get Feng Zhoqing to punish her. Chapter 484. But now, when she saw Lu Qingru in this state, Murongyun could only feel endless sorrow and heartache. Jiyu Yuqin had died innocent. She knew that nothing had happened between her and the Prince Regent that night. She had only been schemed against. As for Lu Qingru, she really had affairs with so many men. How about it? Do you want to expose me to the emperor? Tell him that I had affairs with so many men? Speaking of which, I had long wanted to experience Qin's death personally. I wanted to experience it over and over again. I wanted to know how painful it was to have a nail hammered into your face. I wanted to know how suffocating it was to be locked in a cage, to have rotten eggs thrown at your body, and to be humiliated with the most vicious and despicable tone in the world. Sinking into the lake, the endless river water covering her head, she couldn't move, couldn't resist. How desperate was that feeling? No, don't say any more. All of this was given to her by your GU family. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. Murong-yoon, not only are you evil, you disgust me. You were the one who should have died. You couldn't tell right from wrong and were schemed against. What right do you have to vent all your hatred and dissatisfaction on Chin-er? Why? What right do you have to treat her like this? How hateful. Chin-er was still thinking about you even at the moment of her death. She even asked me, why? She couldn't understand why you would be so biased even though you were both her daughters. She couldn't understand. Compared to Jiu Yuyin, she loved you more. When she saw that you punished Jiu Yuyin, the young Jiu Yuyin was dissatisfied and spat in your tea for you to drink. She rushed over and knocked the tea over. Because of this, you even scolded her for being rebellious and had your nanny slap her more than 10 times. Her face bled from the slaps and the bruises only subsided after a few days. What about you? She loved you wholeheartedly, but you didn't like her at all. You didn't love the daughter you should have loved, but you protected the daughter you shouldn't have loved. She was wrong. She really knew she was wrong. From the moment Jiu Yuqin died, from the moment she dreamed of her every night. Murong-yoon knew that she had already regretted it a long time ago. Chin-er was a child that she had been pregnant with for 10 months. She was still so young, and in fact, she didn't understand anything, but she had transferred all her resentment and complaints to her alone. She was sorry for her. It was all her fault. She covered her face in pain. Chin-er, my Chin-er. Seeing her like this, Lu Qingru laughed instead, looking at her as if she was looking at a clown. Regret it? Murong-yoon, tell me, what's the use of regretting it now? Chin-er was already dead and would never return. Even if you go down to accompany her, she won't come back to life. I'm here to ask you for some of Chin-er's clothes. Concubine Ru, return Chin-er's things to me. I rely on Chin-er's belongings to survive every day. How am I supposed to survive if I give them to you? Lu Qingru turned her back. Murong-yoon, tell me, how good would it be if you had repented earlier? If the living Chin-er saw your repentant look, I don't know how happy she would be, how happy she would be. Unfortunately, it's too late for you to repent, and it's so disgusting. Chapter 485. Her tone changed and her words suddenly became cold. It's a pity, Murong-yoon. You can't accept this. If I tell you everything I know, you won't even be able to live. Hearing the hidden meaning in her words, Murong-yoon looked at her. What do you want to say to me? Don't worry, I'll tell you sooner or later, but now is not the time. Lu Qingru rubbed her brows. Madam Murong, there will be guests coming to my Huayang palace. Don't disturb me. Qingru. It was a soft call that contained a tone of helplessness. It was as if Lu Qingru had returned to the time when she was in the Lu residence. Her mother had also called her by her name in such a loving yet helpless manner. Her tears immediately fell and she clenched her fists. Murong-yoon, we're not that familiar yet. What right do you have to call me by my name? When Chin-er was alive, you were her best friend. I admit that I had some opinions about you before, but now, I promise you that no one will dare to bully you in this harem. You don't have to protect your life, Madam Murong. Do you think I'm doing this for myself? The corner of Lu Qingru's mouth curled up in ridicule. She pulled down her clothes and walked towards the inner hall. You may leave. Qingru, Lu Hui. Lu Hui was always paying attention to every movement in the hall. When she heard Lu Qingru call her, she hurried in and ordered Murong-yoon to leave without thinking. Madam Murong, can't you see that Her Highness doesn't want to receive you? Hurry up and leave. Concubine Ru, I'm here today for Chin-er. I don't mean to make things difficult for you. Chin-er is my daughter and you're just her friend. Since you're her belongings, you should be handed over to me for safekeeping as a mother. Madam Murong, what you said is really funny. Now you know that the late Empress is your daughter. What were you doing earlier? Although my imperial concubine is a friend of the late empress, their relationship is much better than yours as a mother. Madame Murong refuses to leave, but she wants me to go outside and shout that you, Murongyun, are begging here and haven't done anything. You're presumptuous. No matter how good her temper was, she was despised one after another, not to mention Murongyun, who was used to being high and mighty. For the sake of Gu Qin, she had already made herself humble enough. If you hand over Qin's belongings, I will guarantee your safety in this harem. You don't have to receive those men you don't like. Lu Hui's face was livid with anger. Stop spouting nonsense and slandering my concubine. Hui, I've already told her about this matter. Your Highness. Lu Hui stared at her in disbelief. Why did her ladyship tell Murongyun all this? Didn't she know who Murongyun was? If she told His Majesty about this, then Murongyun, also know what the bottom line of morality is. Don't worry, I'll keep my mouth shut about this matter and won't tell anyone else. However, Qin's belongings, Lu Hui gritted her teeth in response to her words. Don't even think about it. How could the relic of the late empress fall into the hands of someone like you? Hui, Your Highness. Give it to her. Your Highness. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Didn't Her Highness just say that she would not hand over the relic of the late empress? Why? Chapter 486. When Murongyun heard that she was willing to give Qin's belongings to her, she couldn't describe how she felt at that moment. It was as if a huge stone had fallen. Lu Qingru glanced at Murongyun indifferently. It suddenly occurred to me that Qin had indeed made something for Madame Murong when she was alive. However, before Madame Murong could see it, Qin was already killed by the two of you. Murongyun felt a pang in her heart when she heard his calm and tranquil words. Even the smile on his face had completely frozen at this moment. Lu Hui wiped her tears and walked into the inner hall to get something. Not long after, she came out with an exquisite small box. She handed the small box to Murongyun bluntly. This is the belongings of the late empress. Her Highness only gave you this one. Murongyun's hands trembled as she took the small wooden box from Lu Hui's hands. When she opened it, she saw the embroidery of a mandarin ducks playing in the water. The scenery was the Phoenix Pavilion that she used to stay in. She remembered that for a long time, she spent a lot of money to find famous embroidery workers in the capital, just so that they could use the Phoenix Pavilion to embroider a pair of mandarin duck embroidered pouches. In the end, every embroidered pouch was unsatisfactory, which made her very dissatisfied. Many years had passed, and because of her dissatisfaction, the matter slowly faded away. However, she didn't expect that when she saw the embroidery of the purse that she had hoped for, it would appear before her eyes. Mandarin ducks playing in the water. What she wanted was not only the mandarin ducks, but also the mood. She wanted the two mandarin ducks to lean on each other and look at each other with love in their eyes. Although their embroidery skills were good and flawless, they were still two mandarin ducks and lacked the mood. However, the purse in front of her, whether it was the mood or the scene of the two mandarin ducks leaning on each other, was so loving that it was obvious that they couldn't bear to part with each other. Immediately, her tears began to fall. It turned out that in a place that she didn't know, her Qina had no regrets. She had quietly sacrificed so much for her. She knew that she wanted this kind of pouch, so she went to embroider it. She didn't even know when she had learned embroidery. Qina, the more Murongyun learned that Qina had secretly done these things for her, the more she couldn't calm down for a long time. She had already treated her like this. Even she herself knew how much she had gone overboard in the past, but she still sacrificed for her without any complaints or regrets. The embroidery was exquisite and the pouch was full of artistic conception. Who knew how many wounds her delicate hands had been pierced by the needles while she was embroidering? How did she manage to embroider such a pouch when she was burdened with so many errands every day? He did not know where she got these needles and thread, or how much she had suffered and how many beatings she had suffered in order to embroider these things. I don't know, there were too many things he didn't know. Murongyun slowly placed the pouch on her chest and grasped it tightly, feeling the warmth of the pouch. It was ice cold, no longer as warm as it was when it was held in the palm of its master's hand for embroidery. Qin, Mother was wrong. Mother was really wrong. Mother shouldn't have treated you like that. It was too late for her to realize her mistake now. She didn't have the responsibility of a mother. She treated Qin in such a way, but Qin didn't have any regrets. Chapter 487. Just like what Lu Qingru said, she didn't know how to love her daughter. She didn't know how to love her daughter, but she protected her daughter. If it was Jiu Yuyin, she wouldn't have treated her like this. Murong Yun looked as if she had lost her soul, stumbling as she left. Lu Hui clenched her teeth in hatred. Your Highness, why didn't you just tell her that Miss Qin is actually the daughter she had with that man, and that it was all a show directed by Jiu Wei himself? It's too early to say it now. The best way to torture someone is to tell her the truth after she has completely regretted it. Give her a heavy blow and make her wish she was dead. Lu Qingru smiled self-deprecatingly. Otherwise, if we let her know the truth, wouldn't Qin's death be too much of a grievance? At this moment in Fengqi Palace, Murong Yun entered the palace again. Yes. Shuang she nodded. She had just received the news from the spies in the palace, but this time, Murong Furen did not enter the palace to find the Empress. According to the spies, she seemed to have gone to Huayang Palace to see concubine Ru. Huayang Palace? Shun Yueji was startled. Why did she go to Huayang Palace? When she was alive, Lu Qingru and Murong Yun were too close to each other. Even Lu Qingru and Murong Yun didn't have a good expression. Thinking of this, Shun Yueji couldn't help but worry. Fortunately, Double Happiness spoke in time, but she came out not long after. It didn't look like she was looking for trouble with concubine Ru. Double Happiness seriously recalled the spy's words. According to the spy, when Madame Murong came out, her eyes were red and swollen, and her face was pale, as if she had just cried. Concubine Ru must have said something that she couldn't accept. Not long after she went in, she stumbled out and left. Really? Then? Shun Yueji still wanted to say something, but Jiao Dezhong's shout from outside the hall stopped her abruptly. His Majesty has arrived. Half of the day had passed and it was already past noon. Hearing Jiao Dezhong's voice, Shun Yueji hurriedly got up from the beauty chair and walked in with a bright yellow robe. She bowed and saluted, Your Majesty. Her bent body was stopped by a strong hand. Aren't you injured? Why did you get out of bed so quickly? The man looked a little unhappy and looked at her. The girl's face was still pale, and her thin and delicate body looked like it could be blown away by the wind. He did not let go of the girl's hand. Knowing that he was worried about her, Shun Yueji revealed a faint smile and leaned into his embrace. Emperor, this minister's concubine is fine. This minister's concubine's body isn't that delicate, it's just a few superficial wounds that bled a bit. Now that the bleeding has stopped, it will heal in a few days. It's just a few small wounds, nothing to worry about. Even so, you still need to lie in bed and listen to the imperial physician's words. Feng Jiuqing pulled her to sit on the bed and stared at her pale and beautiful face. Have you eaten? I just ate some. Yes. Feng Jiuqing gestured for Jiao Dezhong to withdraw first. Double Happiness tactfully retreated as well. Unbeknownst to him, a delicate hairpin had appeared in the man's hand. He silently and gently inserted the hairpin into her hair bun. Other people didn't recognize this hairpin, but Shun Yueji would recognize it even if it turned into ashes. It was the hairpin that was inserted into her hair before she died, and it was also the token of love that he had given to her. Chapter 488. Shun Yueji's hand gently stroked her hair, touching the small and exquisite hairpin. Emperor, is this for Chen Qie? When I saw this hairpin, I felt that it suits you very well, so I gave it to you. Do you like it? How can I not like it given by your Majesty? Shun Yueji smiled shyly and leaned into his arms. Your Majesty is so considerate to give me a gift. I didn't prepare anything for your Majesty. The Emperor was stunned at first, then he smiled gently and said with a doting tone, As long as you are well, it is the best gift for me. If you like it, I will see if there are any accessories suitable for you and bring them to you. Don't. Your Majesty is so nice to me. It will make the younger sisters in the harem angry, especially the Empress. I'm afraid that Sister Empress will not tolerate me anymore. You're so afraid of the Empress? I'm not afraid. I'm just afraid of dealing with the shadow of a crooked person. I think I'm an upright person, but the Empress likes to play tricks behind my back. I can guard against her today, but I can't guard against tomorrow. Not only that. She looked at the young Emperor with a sad expression. I'm afraid that if I go too far, Your Majesty won't believe me. Don't worry, I will believe you. Feng Joqing held her hand. Yueji, when the Jiyu family falls, I will let you be the Empress, okay? Empress was such a tempting condition for a woman in the harem. Even Shen Yueji looked at him blankly. Your Majesty? Qin when I ascend the throne, you will be the only Empress of the Feng country. With you and me working together, we will look down on the Feng country. It will only belong to the two of us. After that, she became his Empress as she wished, the Empress for 3 days. What's wrong? Seeing that she was not in a good mood, the man gently lifted her chin. Shen Yueji smiled and looked away. Your Majesty, you only know how to tease me. You said before that the Empress needs to be a motherly model to the world. For someone like me, I can only be an imperial concubine and be arrogant in the harem. The man was amused by her words and held her in his arms. My beloved concubine, do you bear such a grudge against me? She didn't know if his thin lips touched her neck intentionally or not. It was itchy and numb, causing Shen Yueji to feel goosebumps all over her body. She wanted to push the man away. However, Feng Joqing held her hand tightly, not allowing her to struggle. He hugged her tightly in his embrace. Don't move. You're injured, so behave. Otherwise, your wounds will split open and it will hurt. Then Your Majesty, don't hug this concubine so tightly. This concubine can't even breathe. Hearing her complaint, the man released her helplessly. Seeing that she really blushed because of holding his thin lips, he leaned over and kissed her lips. It was soft, warm, and soft to the touch. Shen Yueji's body shook. Looking at her dumbfounded look, the man found it funny and was about to say something. Pa! The sudden slap caught him off guard. By the time the man reacted, there was already a burning pain on his face. His eyes turned dark and deep in an instant, and his pitch-black eyes turned scarlet in the blink of an eye. Shen Yueji had yet to recover from the slap. She was just about to apologize to Feng Joqing, but as the man's aura engulfed the entire place, her neck was once again captured by the man's large palm. Chapter 489. The suffocating pain assaulted her once again. She looked into the man's scarlet eyes. His face was so cold that it seemed as if it could freeze a person. It was completely different from his gentle face just now. For a moment, she couldn't tell which one was the real him. However, it was only for a moment before his scarlet eyes slowly turned pitch black. Even the large hand that was locked around her neck slowly loosened its grip. Shen Yueji collapsed into his arms weakly. The man took her and held her in his arms. His voice was hoarse, and he couldn't calm down after the attack. Yueji. Your Majesty. Rest well. I'll go to the imperial study to deal with official business. Maybe the suffocating pain was so real that she felt like she was in hell again. Shen Yueji looked at his back as he left, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. When Shuangshi came in, he saw that she was wiping her lips. Her lips were about to break and bleed. What's wrong, Your Highness? Summon Master Kong Yin. I want to see him now. Shuangshi didn't know what was going on, but she still did as she was told. But not long after, she came back and looked at Shen Yueji with a troubled expression. Your Highness, Master Kong Yin was summoned out of the imperial study by the Emperor. Shen Yueji thought for a moment. Then let's go to the imperial study. Your Highness. Shuangshi looked at her in surprise. Your Highness, you're still injured. If you go to the imperial study now, you'll be suspected. It's okay. Ji Chu is in the dark. There won't be a problem. Thinking of Ji Chu, Shuangshi felt a little relieved. Your Highness, I'll help you wash up first. Imperial studied the door to the secret room opened, and a girl in white lay inside. She had a pale and delicate face. She lay there quietly, lifeless, like a dead person. To be precise, she was a dead person. If it weren't for the fact that her bones hadn't rotted for months, she would have become a pile of bones. Your Majesty, Kong Yin. Kong Yin pushed the door open and saw the female corpse in the secret room. His eyes darkened, and he knelt down respectfully. Feng Zhouqing retracted his gaze from the girl's face and looked at Kong Yin, who was kneeling not far away. His eyes were scarlet red, as if they were stained with fresh blood. It was a glaring red, and there seemed to be blood flowing out. Kong Yin was inwardly alarmed, but his expression was unusually calm. I wonder why Your Majesty has summoned this official here. When will she wake up? Your Majesty, I can't say for sure. When the time is right, she will wake up, but I'm just worried that even if the late Empress wakes up, Your Majesty, you'll still kill her. This sentence caused the man's straight and tall body to shake violently. He was in a sorry state, as if he couldn't stand steadily. If not for the wall behind him, he would have been able to support himself. The scarlet in his eyes deepened, almost as if blood was gushing out. A few drops of blood flowed from the corners of his eyes and landed on his bright yellow robe. Furthermore, I wasn't lying to Your Majesty when I said those words back then. The late Empress' body is still there, but her soul is gone. Even if she wakes up, she will no longer be the late Empress, regardless of the cost. I don't care who she is, I won't allow her to die. Kong Yin. His gentle face had long been replaced by a sharp iciness, like the coldest snow on the top of an iceberg. Just looking at him would make people feel cold, and it would freeze their bones. Chapter 490. Kong Yin was startled for a moment and quickly lowered his head. Your Majesty, I know you are an enlightened monk. You must have a way. You must save him at all costs. No matter what you want, I will give it to you. Your Majesty, this is the will of the heavens. I have already said that even if I save her, she is no longer the former Empress. Your Majesty, can you stop yourself and protect her? Even if the former Empress comes back to life, she will still die in a few days. Your Majesty, even you can't stop it, let alone me. The water spirit pearl can only keep a person's body from rotting for 3 months. Now that almost 2 months have passed, if the former Empress doesn't wake up soon, her body will rot. Because of his words, Feng Zhouqing looked at her delicate face. There were already very light black spots. If one didn't look closely, they wouldn't be able to see it at all. He slowly walked to the front of the corpse and touched her cheek with his big palm. Suddenly, he twitched his lips and murmured as if he was mocking himself, "Actually, how can Jiangshan be compared to you? It has never been." But he never had the right to say this, let alone the chance to say it to her. He was like a weirdo that shouldn't exist in this world. Not only should he not exist, he didn't even have the ability to protect her. Seeing him like this, Kong Yin sighed and said, Your Majesty, everything is destined. Actually, there were some words that he was destined not to say. In fact, after Jiu Yueqin's death, he still had a chance. It was just that his love was too dark. Perhaps, his love for Jiu Yueqin wasn't any less than Mo Wushang's, but the fact that he had twin souls meant that he didn't have much time to interact with Shen Yueji. Moreover, his mind was only focused on the person in this secret chamber. He simply couldn't sense that things remained the same, but people had changed. This person wasn't human. The person in front of him was the one he truly loved. Over the years, he had witnessed too many sorrows and joys, as well as the most miserable feelings. Some were reconciled, some were lifelong regrets. Shen Yueji had feelings for him. She couldn't let go of her 9 years of deep love, even now. But this deep love had been slowly grinding. Even if she knew more, she would never fall in love with the man in front of her again. Amitabha. Your Majesty, don't persist in going about things the wrong way. Stubborn. Feng Zhouqing looked at him. His black eyes were scarlet, and there seemed to be an endless sea of blood surging in them. Kong Yin shook his head and sighed. He walked up to the man and gently brushed his face with his hand. The moment she retracted her hand, She could clearly see the redness in the man's eyes slowly recede and return to normal. Looking at the opened secret chamber and the familiar young lady lying in it, Feng Joqing shook his head and sat down on the dragon throne dejectedly. Ever since Jiyu Yuqin died, he has been appearing more and more frequently. I feel like I'm about to be replaced by him. His obsession is too deep, and it has already accumulated into resentment in His Majesty's heart. So, when His Majesty is tired, I'm afraid that you won't be able to suppress him. Feng Joqing looked at him when he heard this, but it wasn't long before he withdrew his gaze and looked at the white-clothed young woman that lay silently in the secret chamber. The young woman still had that pale and delicate face. She wasn't devastatingly beautiful, but her appearance was pleasing to the eye. He didn't linger and quickly withdrew his gaze from the young woman's face. As he placed his hand on the tea set on the dragon throne, the door to the secret chamber quickly closed, completely isolating the people inside. Chapter 491. Master Kong Yin, you are an enlightened monk. We have always respected you. We believe that you must have a way to suppress him. This, Your Majesty. Kong Yin once again knelt down in front of him. I have indeed devoted myself to cultivation for many years in front of Buddha. Compared to everything else, I am much more knowledgeable. However, I am still an ordinary person. No matter who it is, they are all my masters. I am afraid that I cannot help Your Majesty with this matter. You can only rely on yourself. Feng Joqing is silent. When he was alone with Shen Yueji, he could clearly feel that he appeared many times. But he did not know what he did to Shen Yueji. He could only see Shen Yueji looking at him with fear and timidity when he woke up. Such an obedient and boring woman, how did he fall in love with her? For a dead person, she did not hesitate to resist him for so long. Even when she died, she would fight to the death. He would only rush out to look at her a few more times. Thinking of the pale little face in the secret room, she was even weaker than a paper doll. The man's thin lips move. She was boring when she was alive, and even more boring when she was dead. It was such a boring woman that he couldn't forget about until now. The man's slender fingers lightly touch the table and look at the man kneeling on the ground. We asked you to secretly search for evidence of the Jiyu family's bribery. How is the search going? Those people are all men of sacrifice. I have used all the torture methods, but they refused to speak. Is that so? The young emperor smiles and his dark eyes are dark. You are indeed a member of the Jiyu family. Since they do not speak, then kill them, lest the Jiyu family find out. Yes. But, Your Majesty, there is one more thing that I do not know if I should say. Say it. When I was executing those men of sacrifice, a young man of sacrifice blurted out before he died that the Jiyu family had recently made a move against the Shen family. Oh! The Shen family has a tiger eagle that cries in the middle of the night. What's more, it is said that there is a big dragon living in the tiger's body. The sound it makes at night is a dragon's roar. It indicates that a real dragon has appeared in the Shen family. Your Majesty, this is an ominous sign for Your Majesty's country. The emperor's face instantly turned cold. Kong Yin quickly kowtowed. There is something fishy about this matter. Regarding the Shen family's style of doing things, Your Majesty should know about it. If there was such a strange matter, it would have been known by the common people in the capital. But this kind of rumor was only recently known in the capital. It can be assumed that the Jiyu family wanted to frame and get rid of the Shen family. Kong Yin heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the emperor's expression had eased a little. In the next few days, the Jiyu family will most likely make a move against the Shen family. I wonder if Your Majesty will. In the past, men might have chosen to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight, letting them fight to the death. But now, he narrowed his eyes and thought of the woman in Fengqi Palace. Recently, there has been trouble in the Hugong. If something happens to the Empress, the Jiyu family will naturally put aside the matter of the General Fu. Understanding the meaning behind the Emperor's words, Kong Yin nodded. Your Majesty, did you say that something strange happened in Wu Jiaoi's bedroom again? The entire Feng country belonged to him. How could Feng Joqing not know about the things that happened in the Hugong? Jiu Yuechin's corpse was lying in his imperial study. He did not believe the rumors in the Hugong. A corpse lying in his imperial study could run out and cause trouble. There must be someone behind this. Kong Yin. Your Majesty. Follow me to Huayang Palace. Yes. Chapter 492. Niang Niang. Outside the main hall, she saw Double Happiness coming in with a head full of sweat. Shen Yueji stopped what she was doing. What's wrong? Why are you panicking again? This servant originally told Master Kong Yin to come to Phoenix Palace to see Niang Niang after he left the imperial study. But who knew that His Majesty actually brought Master Kong Yin to Huayang Palace to see Concubine Ru? Niang Niang, do you think that His Majesty is going to pamper Concubine Ru? Pamper? Shen Yueji's small face became serious. No matter what, it was not a good thing for Lu Qingru. If Feng Juqing really pampered her, then she was no longer a virgin. He would definitely notice. If it wasn't pampering, Lu Qingru had been alone in Huayang Palace for so long. For so long, Feng Juqing did not care about her at all. Why did he suddenly go to Huayang Palace? Or did he find out something? Niang Niang. Niang Niang. Shen Yueji regained her senses and immediately stood up. Let's go, follow this consort to Huayang Palace. Niang Niang. If you go to Huayang Palace at this time, aren't you fighting with His Majesty? I can't care so much. If this consort doesn't go, Concubine Ru will definitely be in danger. Double Happiness did not understand. What did Concubine Ru's life and death have to do with Miss? Miss didn't know her. But she did not dare to disobey Shen Yueji. She could only respectfully accept the order, yes. Inside Huayang Palace. Hearing Jiao Dezhong's announcement from outside the hall, Lu Hui panicked. Inside the crimson curtain, the two figures intertwined with each other were faintly discernible. The man was clearly aroused as he let out a long and continuous sigh. On the other hand, the woman under him was like a puppet. From beginning to end, she did not make a single sound. Lu Hui could not care so much anymore. She rushed into the hall and knelt in front of the bed. Niang Niang, His Majesty is here. His Majesty? When the man who was on top of Lu Qingru heard that His Majesty was here, his body stiffened. He quickly withdrew from the woman's body. He began to put on his clothes in a flurry. What a joke. Even the people in Jianghu were afraid of the emperor. Especially someone like him who had stolen someone into the imperial palace. Even if it was a soft concubine who was not favored, she was still the emperor's woman. If someone like him, who swaggered around and did not put the emperor in his eyes, was caught by the emperor, would he be able to get out alive? Compared to the man's panic, Lu Qingru was leisurely putting on her clothes. Seeing that the man got out of bed and was about to leave, she said coldly, "Where are you going?" When the man heard this, he turned back to look at her. His expression was full of joy. He smiled and kissed her white face a few more times. Then he let go of her reluctantly. "Baby, isn't the emperor here?" "No matter how bold I am, this is the emperor's territory. You are his concubine in name. I am going out to avoid the limelight. I will come back to accompany you another day." He sneered. At this moment, the emperor is outside the hall. You boast of your high martial arts skills, but you forget that the emperor is also a martial artist. Do you think you can leave this Huayang palace unharmed? Lu Qingrou's reminder made the man understand a little more. She was right. Even he had almost forgotten that the emperor knew martial arts. No matter where he went, he would be discovered by Feng Juqing. The whole Huayang palace was only so big. He was also a little anxious. His ugly face showed a panicked expression. "Then tell me, what should I do?" Chapter 493. Seeing that Lu Qingru did not speak, he could not help but become even more anxious. "Don't you know why I sneaked into the palace from outside? If it weren't for you, I would be living a carefree and happy life outside with all kinds of beauties. Why would I take such a risk to sneak into the palace to have sex with you?" Lu Qingru restrained the hatred in her eyes and turned her face away. no longer looking at him, "Hide under the bed, hold your breath, and don't make a sound." The man glanced at the wide bed and saw that there was still a lot of space under it. Without saying anything, he jumped down and hid. Lu Qingru put on her clothes neatly and walked out of the main hall. The man had already sat down elegantly on the main seat. He looked at the tea set on the tea table with one hand, but had no intention of drinking tea. Seeing Lu Qingru come out from inside, there was a warm smile on the corner of his mouth. "I heard from Jiao Dezhong that concubine Ru has not been feeling well recently." Jiao Dezhong? He did not say that. Why did he pay attention to the concubines in the harem? He could not afford to be praised like this. Unfortunately, he did not dare to refute the emperor's words and could only accept his fate. "Your concubine greets your majesty." Ignoring the emperor's words, Lu Qingru bowed to him. The man's smile was not hidden as he looked at her gently, but he was not in a hurry to let her get up. "Concubine Ru, why didn't you tell me that your body is not well?" "It's just a small cold." "Speaking of which, your majesty has the body of a noble dragon. It's better to stay away from me, lest my cold infects you. Your father was once a loyal minister of Feng country with outstanding military achievements. Even if he is no longer alive, I will take care of his only daughter." When he mentioned his father, it was obvious that he had forgotten who was responsible for the hundreds of innocent lives of the Lu family. Her hands under her long sleeves were clenched tightly. Lu Qingru's face was pale, and she bit her lips so hard that they almost bled, but she suddenly smiled. "Yes, my Lu family has been loyal to Feng country for many years. For so many years, we have been loyal without any regrets, and we have made many fearless sacrifices for Feng country. Unfortunately, the Lu family is already dead. They were executed by a careless emperor. Concubine Ru, how dare you?" Jiao Dezhong's expression instantly changed as he reprimanded him. However, the young emperor did not show the slightest bit of displeasure on his face. Instead, he smiled slightly, and his slender fingers lightly tapped on the table, producing a crisp sound. When this sound fell into Lu Qingru's ears, it was undoubtedly like a talisman that hastened her death. Oppression, panic. In her heart, there was only deep hatred and unreconciled hatred. If she could, how she wished she could pounce on him and kill this beast with her own hands. If it wasn't for her, her parents would still be alive and well. If it wasn't for him, she and Qin wouldn't have been separated forever. If it wasn't for him, the hatred that shot out from her eyes was so undisguised. She wanted nothing more than to eat his flesh and drink his blood. When Feng Zhouqing saw this, he stood up from his seat. He slowly walked towards her. "Your Majesty, you can't." Seeing this, Jiao Dezhong hurriedly stopped him. Feng Zhouqing looked back at him, and he immediately stayed where he was, shut his mouth, and stopped talking. "The Lu family is loyal to me. Such a loyal minister is rare. If it wasn't for concubine Ru's treachery and murder of the empress, your father and mother wouldn't have sacrificed so many lives of the Lu family in exchange for your safety in the harem." It was difficult to tell whether he was angry or suppressing the fire in his heart. The girl was wearing a loose outer garment. Feng Zhouqing narrowed his eyes and glanced at her. He bent down, his slender jade-like hands lightly picking at Lu Qingru's clothes. Lu Hui was shocked and wanted to stop him, but she was still a step too late. The young girl's white neck was densely covered with kiss marks, some deep and some shallow. It was obviously not the work of a man. This time, Lu Hui's expression changed completely. Even Jiao Dezhong, when he saw the ambiguous marks on her neck, his face was hard to tell. Chapter 495. Imperial concubine Ru actually. Did she forget how the previous empress died and why she was drowned in the lake? She actually followed suit? Was she really so bold that she didn't even want her life anymore? Lu Qingru's face was pale. Feng Zhouqing gently cupped her chin and looked at her beautiful and gentle little face, his fingertips gently rubbing against it. It had to be said that this face was even more beautiful than those women in the harem. Even Jiu Yuqin couldn't compare to this beautiful face. But this Zhen has been busy recently and neglected my beloved imperial concubine. So that my beloved imperial concubine has another man in this harem? His tone suddenly became deep and ambiguous, and it was accompanied by a low chuckle. By the time Lu Qingru reacted, her entire body had already been carried horizontally by Feng Jiuqing. Lu Qingru's face changed and Lu Hui hurriedly tried to stop him. Your imperial concubine. Jiao Dezhong hurriedly grabbed Lu Hui's arm and dragged her out of the hall. This little girl looked so skinny, but how could she struggle with so much strength? Let me go. Beloved imperial concubine is my woman, why should this Zhen let you go? Don't you know that I've had affairs with many men? Feng Jiuqing, I'm so dirty, do you still have the heart to do it? The man threw her on the bed unceremoniously, his strength was a bit stronger than before. He pressed on her without any tenderness. Feng Jiuqing's thin lips hooked up into a faint smile. Beloved imperial concubine doesn't feel dirty, let alone this Zhen. With that, he didn't give her a chance to resist at all, took off her thin clothes and went in. Lu Qingru originally knew how to struggle, but in the end, she forgot to struggle, only tears slid down her cheeks. The fact that she and Feng Jiuqing had merged their bodies, she didn't know if Qina would blame her. In matters of love, the man didn't have the slightest emotion, he only vented to her, he wouldn't kiss her, he wouldn't touch her. Lu Qingru felt pain all over her body. She bit her lower lip, not allowing herself to make a shameful sound. Feng Jiuqing, she knew that this man was deliberately using this method to torture her, because he knew that this was more unacceptable than killing her. He knew that she felt injustice for Qin in her heart, so he wanted her. Not only did he want her to sink into hatred every day, he wanted her to sink into self-blame and regret. Your Highness, you can't go in. His Majesty and concubine Ru are outside the palace, looking at Jiao Dezhong who was desperately trying to stop her. Shen Yueji glared at him fiercely. Had he forgotten who he was after not needing her for a few days? Jiao Dezhong felt guilty under her glare. Of course, he knew who he was, but the emperor was now doting on concubine Ru, how could he let her in? In short, it wouldn't be good if the imperial consort saw this. Imperial concubine, please save my imperial concubine. His Majesty. His Majesty. Lu Hui knelt down in front of her crying. Her voice was hoarse, and her eyes were red and swollen. It was obvious that she had been crying for a long time. Her hoarse voice made people's scalps go numb, almost unable to speak because of her crying. Shen Yueji no longer hesitated. Seeing that Jiao Dezhong was still desperately trying to stop her, she narrowed her eyes dangerously, and her voice became several levels colder. Jiao Dezhong, how dare you? You even dare to stop me, quickly get out of the way. Chapter 496. Jiao Dezhong was shocked and didn't dare to stop her anymore after being scolded by her. He could only obediently take a step back. Imperial concubine, I stopped you for your own good, but His Majesty is now. Shen Yueji's heart was full of Lu Qingru now. She didn't care what he had to say and rushed in without thinking. Shuang she also followed her footsteps. Inside the hall, there was nothing at all. Shen Yueji quickly walked to the inner hall. The red curtain was put down, and she could vaguely see the entangled figures inside. Her eyes were instantly fixated on it, and she couldn't move her eyes away. At this moment, she couldn't tell what she was feeling. However, she still quickly stepped forward and lifted the curtain. Both of them were familiar faces. One was extraordinarily handsome, and the other was beautiful and gentle. Their clothes were not removed, but their lower bodies were tightly pressed together. The large clothes covered the place where the two of them were entangled, but this made one's imagination even more wild and fanciful. Feng Jiuqing's movement stopped because of the sudden intrusion of Shen Yueji. For some reason, when he saw Shen Yueji suddenly appearing here, the man looked stunned for a moment. After he reacted, he quickly withdrew from Lu Qingru's body. If it was anyone else, he would have been angry. But when he saw that it was Shen Yueji, he didn't get angry, but in the depths of his heart, there was a trace of panic. Seeing eunuch Gao's panic outside and Lu Hui's heart-wrenching cry, I thought there was some conflict between the Emperor and Sister Ru Fei, but I didn't expect. Her tone was more sarcastic. It's me who overstepped. You can continue. After saying that, she turned around and left without looking back. Yueji. When Shin Yueji walked a few steps, the man behind her had already dressed up and walked quickly towards her. Shin Yueji didn't listen and didn't have the slightest intention to stop. Feng Joqing took her hand and stopped her from going forward. Is the Emperor explaining to Imperial concubine Shin? Behind him, Lu Qingrou's funny and sweet voice sounded. I am the same as Sister Imperial concubine, we are both the Emperor's women. Who the Emperor favors, isn't it a matter of the Emperor's words? Guifei is really too much. Do you really think that just because His Majesty is good to you, he can pamper you alone? That's right. You and Ben Gong are both His Majesty's women. Who His Majesty favors is his own business. Ben Gong has never felt that just because His Majesty is good to Ben Gong, he can only favor Ben Gong. At this moment, Shin Yueji didn't care about the rules. As long as she thought of the two entangled figures, she felt disgusted. She unceremoniously shook off the man's hand. Your Majesty, don't let Ru Fei's sister wait anxiously. If this woman doesn't get satisfied, her temper is very bad. Imperial Consort. The Emperor's face darkened. He didn't turn around to look at Lu Qingrou behind him. Instead, he ignored Shin Yueji's struggles and carried her in his arms as he walked out. Shin Yueji did not struggle. She leaned into his embrace and looked at the girl behind the curtain through his arm. The smirk on her face was so bright that it burned her eyes. What hurt her was not the fact that she had an affair with Feng Joqing, but, in order to avenge her, she was willing to do such a despicable thing. All along, she thought that she was alone, but there was someone else who was avenging her and planning for her. This was the first time she met Lu Qingrou face to face. She didn't expect that under such circumstances. She almost blurted out, Qingrou, I am actually Shin I'm back. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.